Welcome back to Public Affairs on Peach. Hope you're having a good Saturday morning. It is a warm one, we know, so try and stay cool, get some water in your system, and enjoy this political discussion here, the panel we have. We are talking about the 2016 presidential election and some local politics as well here in the state of Georgia with Republican strategist Julianne Thompson and Democratic strategist Theron Johnson. And we want to begin this segment by playing 3 statements from Donald Trump out on the campaign trail, and then we'll get your reaction.
I call President Obama and Hillary Clinton the founders of ISIS. They're the founders. You get the MVP award. ISIS will hand her the most valuable player award. Her only competition is Barack Obama.
If she gets to pick her judges, nothing you can do, folks. Although the Second Amendment people, maybe there is, I don't know. But he handed me his Purple Heart. I always wanted to get the Purple Heart. This was much easier.
Okay, there he is, the Republican nominee for President of the United States. I want to get your reaction first. Go ahead, Julianne.
Well, thankfully, that's kind of old news.
Yes.
Those clips.
But they do encompass Donald Trump and his campaign.
They absolutely do, and that's something that is going to have to change. And like I said, I truly hope that Kellyanne Conway can change that and Donald Trump can stay on message. And I have hope that she can. I think that the comments were unfortunate, but I also think that there is a certain amount of media bias where this is concerned. I think that if you look at other sound bites from Hillary over the past week, you will see that she actually said that Donald Trump is fanning the flames of ISIS. So she has said similar things about him. She has actually compared Republicans to Nazis on the issue of abortion. So I think that there's plenty of blame to go around when it comes to negative politics in 2016.
No doubt about negative politics in 2016. Theron, your reaction to the clip?
You know, I think the problem with Donald Trump is that he was good at The Apprentice, right? I mean, he made millions.
He's very entertaining.
You know, he's very entertaining.
Yes.
And I think that, honestly, it worked for you during the primary season. And quite frankly, it worked up until the convention. But now, again, with less than 80 days to go, candidates have got to be very presidential, and I think he's missing the mark. The challenge with the comment that he made about ISIS is that when he was really pressed on it and really people educated him on it, he said, oh, I was just being sarcastic. And I think that that's the problem. Now, I'll be fair here. The thing that really concerns me is at a time where he, again, will not be this new teleprompter Donald Trump. He's going to be this off-the-cuff, sort of insulting his way to the White House type of Donald Trump. I'm not saying he's going to win, but that's his intention. I just think that, honestly, what the Hillary Clinton campaign has got to do is cannot continue to be in defense mode. They've got to get on message. They got to continue to talk about the issues that matter most to the American people.
Because their message so far seems to, just as a person sitting back in a chair and watching this campaign as an armchair quarterback, have just been not him.
Yeah, and that's worked for her a lot.
Right.
And I think, you know, for a while after the convention when she got a huge bump, it was basically selling down the Bernie Sanders people, which is, I think we accomplished that goal. I mean, there's still some work to do there. But ultimately now, you can't just say, hey, everything is wrong with that guy, pick me. You got to talk about your vision for the future. You got to talk about education. You got to talk about jobs and healthcare. And I think that's what she is going to do very soon.
What a segue, Theron, because I'm going to ask you guys to swap hats for a second. You're advising Hillary Clinton. How do you get her to Pennsylvania Avenue? I know that's probably not something you'd want to do, but anyways.
My goodness, let me see. Let me come up with some really bad advice. I actually agree with what Theron just said. She's been on the defensive instead of the offensive, and she has relied on the fact that he's going to make bombastic statements, and she has just sat back and said, okay, let Trump be Trump. But I think that that's a big mistake, because I think there is a very large segment of the U.S. population that's tired of political correctness, and even though many people may cringe at some of the things he says, he is resonating with a lot of voters, and I think she needs to take that a lot more seriously than she has been.
All right, you play advisor to Donald Trump. How do you get him to win at this point? I mean, he's clearly down in the polls. By how many we don't know, because polling is polling. It's a couple months out. But he needs to climb back to where he was a couple months ago and beyond. What does he have to do?
If I had a chance to really sit in an echo chamber, because that's really what he's created for himself, I would tell Donald Trump a few things. Number one, listen, you got to appeal to women. I mean, he is doing terrible with the women, even with.
How do you do that if
Well,
you're
I
Donald
think
Trump
you got to
at this
start
point?
basically talking about foreign affairs because, listen, as Julianne has pointed out many times, sometimes Hillary Clinton, she does sort of play the gender card, focusing on that I have an opportunity to be the first woman. But I think you got to talk about foreign affairs. I think you got to talk about jobs. More importantly, he needs to talk about values. I mean, that's something that the Republican Party really pride themselves off of. Secondly, listen, he's got to get into some of these battleground states like Ohio and Florida. I mean, at a time in Georgia right now, whether you look at different polls, he's statistically tied here. And so he's got to defend.
And Mike Pence is coming here Monday.
Yeah, he'll be here Monday. And then the last advice I would tell him, listen, if you want to have a conversation with African Americans in any demographic group, make sure that you actually have them at the table. Make sure that you understand our issues before you go out and basically try to appeal to us. I think that was a big, big mistake on his part.
Okay, let's bring things back locally here to the state of Georgia. There is really one race statewide that people are talking about. That is Senator Johnny Isakson and his competitor, the man with the hat, Jim Barksdale. That's probably why you would know him out there from his ads. He wears that little touring cap. The latest poll I saw, which was about 2 weeks ago, we don't do a lot of polling here in the statewide races, was the AJC's poll that showed it single digits. As close as 6 points. Now, we've seen a lot of Democrats run within 6 points in polling that don't seem to get across the finish line here. Do you take his campaign seriously against Isakson?
Well, on one hand, I don't, but on the other hand, I don't want to take anything for granted. I feel like Johnny Isakson is going to move on to a very solid victory. I think the polls were very close with Michelle Nunn in the past, and of course, we know how that turned out, and also with Jason Carter for a while. But I think that Johnny Isakson will, there's no doubt that he's going to win. But I hope that the Republican Party doesn't take this for granted, because this is a symptom of the kind of political climate that we're in right now, which is very different than we've ever had before. And just given the fact that last summer nobody ever thought that Donald Trump would make it to the place that he's at right now, I think in this climate you take nothing for granted.
I know Jim Barksdale personally, spent some time with him. I mean, he's a really, really great man. I mean, his heart is in the right place. He really wants to move this country forward, and he really has some good ideas. The challenge is not so much of the candidate. I mean, he's spent, I think, millions of his own money to try to finance the campaign.
We've seen him on our air quite a bit during our morning news on CBS 46.
But here's the challenge, and I've said this time and time again. Right now in Georgia, it's about a 250,000 to 300,000 gap between a Republican being elected statewide and a Democrat being elected statewide. A lot of those 250,000, 300,000 folks are conservative Democrats who have voted Republican in the last 6 to 8 years. One thing about Johnny Isakson is that he not only appeals to Republicans, he appeals to some Democrats. What Jim Barksdale has got to do is that he's got to have a message to solidify our base here in Georgia, but also appeal to some of these white voters who have been conservative Democrats who have voted for people like Johnny Isakson. I mean, at a time when we got our former governor, Roy Barnes, and Congressman Scott, and even Sam Nunn, whose daughter just lost, giving money to Johnny Isakson, I think that kind of shows the Barksdale campaign that they got to do a little bit more outreach. But ultimately, listen, it's going to be about turnout. And the one good thing for Barksdale is that it's a presidential year. Let's not forget that Senator, at that time, Saxby Chambliss, went to a runoff with Jim Martin in the presidential year back in 2008. So I think the turnout will be high. I think it's too close a call, but I think Jim Barksdale has a shot.
Okay, we'll find out in November. Theron, Julianne, thanks so much for joining us this morning on Public Affairs on Peach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, when we return, we will talk to an Emory University political science professor about her impressions of this presidential campaign and the ones locally.